as the potentially deadly twister skips capriciously through Northside. The view from downtown is only somewhat ominous. Beautiful, really, said those of us who gathered on Sunset Hill to watch. And while that first skip on Brooklyn Park Boulevard was powerful and damaging, the tornado's mercy was bountiful.
All I could say was thank you, Jesus, and I kept running.
Tossed trees mainly just brushed homes and poked out windows instead of human flesh. Flying fences didn't kill. And this massive tree just missed flattening this car and the young women inside.
All of a sudden, the wind started blowing real hard. The hail started hitting the car. The limbs of the tree started hitting up against all the windows. And next thing I know, she stopped the car, and the big tree fell in front of us, and another tree hit the back of the car, and the window busted out. And then it stopped. We got out and ran to the children's hospital.
I'm still alive, and that's a blessing, because it could have been the other way.
Praise God, said one worker at the children's hospital, where the tornado briefly danced just outside.
In the bitter cold, crews spent about 3 hours trying to knock down the fire at this apartment building at Old Buckingham Station. Neighbors tell us once they realized they were in danger, they scrambled to get out, even banging on doors to alert each other. And when the fire was over, this is what was left.
As of right now, we have no home. It's gone.
I don't know who's giving me stuff.
Madison and Taylor understand what happened Monday morning.
My baby doll got burned up.
But without any prodding, they're happy to tell you what's happened since then.
And he bought us some brand new shoes. Yeah.
Their parents realize just how lucky the family is, escaping without anyone getting hurt.
We could have lost everything, not just our belongings, but our kids, our lives.
The Red Cross gave them a temporary place to stay and some money to get necessities. The kindness of strangers is a big help, too.
A single shot through his kitchen window in March.
The next thing I know, I was on the floor.
A split second in life Terry Nero would love to forget, but that's certainly not the case.
There was a somewhat of a commotion, something that I can't describe because I was shot.
The bullet traveling over Nero's 80-year-old mother's shoulder and shattering his jaw. Police say it wasn't random. It was a cold and calculated attack.
I certainly do have moments every day that I ponder, I think, I wonder.
It's another day at Tuckahoe Elementary. Like most schools, the sights and sounds are the same. But unlike most schools, children have been coming here to learn for 62 years.
We're so glad you're here.
Kindergarten teacher Lynn Archer has been here for 36 of those 62 years.
I'll keep going until this body tells me no more. What is 35 divided by 3?
Some of Archer's former students are now teachers at Tuckahoe.
That's the key.
And she's the grand teacher to dozens of children of students past.
My mom told me right before I went, she said, "Oh, I had Miss Archer when I was your age."
I have a picture of when I was 5 or 6 sitting on her lap at field day, and she looks exactly the same with the long hair.
All the trials and troubles.
She sings a deep and soulful country gospel. I think you can hear the truth of what she sings.
Teresa Lewis is singing for strength and comfort with her execution set 2 days away. She sang in church through her childhood in Danville. Both parents worked in a textile mill. Back then, Lewis shared a room with her 3 siblings. Now in solitary confinement for the past 7 years, her former chaplain says her singing voice was used to carry hope to other inmates nearby.
She will start to sing a song of faith, and it quiets. And I've seen it happen.
On a phone call from Jared, Teresa Lewis sang and spoke to us. Her spirits from beginning to end were surprisingly high.
Hello, Miss Beck, how are you?
But quickly, the conversation turned to how she was in what could be her final hours, her answer still hopeful.
Hoping that something's going to turn around.
I get chills still watching it.
Carrie Wirtz says she still can't believe what she saw and recorded. A naked man getting beat up.
2 guys punched him, it looked like there, and then now 3 of them are kicking him. And he's laying helpless on the ground, not trying to attack back, just trying to cover his face.
It happened around 2 in the morning Sunday. The bars had just let out. 200 to 300 people outside on the corner of Robinson and Main in Richmond's Fan District, and a naked man in his 20s, intoxicated, in the middle of the street.
He was stumbling around, not trying to fight anyone. He wasn't acting violent.
He approaches an SUV full of men. A few seconds later,
3 of the men in the car jumped out. One of them punched the guy in the side of the face. He helplessly fell to the ground, covered his face to protect himself, and the men continued to kick him from the front and from the back.
Soon, police arrived, and Wirtz shows 2 of the officers the video.
And both of them said they didn't need it.
You would have to dig deep to get to the bottom of the Chris Baker story. He signed his name with an X, but he taught doctors how to save lives.
He was so hated in his own community.
And yet he was respected by the white elite, including State Governor William Cameron. He was totally comfortable with prowling cemeteries, but ran and hid at the first hint of lightning. It was said he could wield black magic. One of the key figures in the history of the Medical College of Virginia was born in the basement of this building right here, the Egyptian building. He would spend his entire life here, in the midst of the bones from the graves that he robbed. Anatomy is the foundation of medicine, and dissection has long been the way to learn anatomy.
MCV actually began as the medical department of Hampton-Sydney College. And it began here in Richmond because there was abundance of clinical material. And that meant there were people without families, there were free blacks, there were slaves working for hire in the city, and you'd have ready access to patients and also ready access to cadavers.
That meant there were men like Chris Baker at many of the nation's medical schools. Men who could bring in fresh bodies, cheap, about $5, not many questions asked. Grave robbers, resurrectionists. But old Chris, as he was called, also became an uncanny master of anatomy.
It's said that he could usually tell which medical students would make it through anatomy.
Before electricity, the dissections occurred under a skylight on the 4th floor of the Egyptian building. As was customary, budding doctors posed with the bodies that taught them about life. Chris Baker was often invited into those photographs. As Dr. Albert Pilkington, class of 1900, said, there was no more loyal member of the college than Chris Baker. Now, the methods of preserving the bodies were very crude. Can you imagine the smell?
Medical schools did require fresh subjects.
Bodies that weren't fresh enough for dissection went into Baker's vat in the basement, where quicklime stripped off muscle and tissue. Old Chris sold the skeletons to students for $5. Blacks in Richmond hated and feared him so that parents reportedly scared their children into behaving simply by evoking his name.
Chris Baker would get you either after the grave, or in some cases they felt like he went out at night and deliberately killed people to obtain bodies.
Reportedly, he was shot at numerous times.
In addition to assisting all the students and kind of supervising the lab, he was responsible then also to the demonstrator and the professor of anatomy and meeting their needs.
Chris Baker was known to haunt Sycamore Cemetery in Northside and Oakwood Cemetery in Northeast Richmond. That's where he was caught red-handed with his assistant and 2 white medical students by a police officer named Angel. Governor Cameron pardoned him, and the General Assembly soon passed a law that allowed the bodies of criminals and the destitute to go to medical colleges. Even though Chris Baker worked at least 50 years among diseased bodies and harsh elements like mercury, he lived until June 8, 1919. He was believed to be about 70 years old. He died in the Egyptian building, according to his obituary published in Richmond newspapers. And while doctors attended that funeral, and many wrote of his legacy, the legend of Chris Baker has largely lain quietly, undisturbed.
July 15th, 1944. I am just writing a few lines. I had a telegram Monday. Jack was killed in action.
Voices from the past.
October 14th, 1944. I regret to inform you your son, Private First Class Sam Canello, was slightly wounded in action.
Fading letters penned on the home front and on the front lines.
The stillness is as bad as all the noise.
Aging words that paint a picture of the triumphs and tragedy of war.
I am bitter. This business of being proud of a casket with a flag on it is not the kind of thing I go for.
You won't find these artifacts in the Smithsonian or National Archives.
They come to know history in a more intimate way.
Textbooks are cast aside in Jim Treisler's classroom at Clover Hill High School.
I love history, and I found in teaching American history that we were in such a rush to cover 400 years of history that there wasn't enough time to really get into the small stories, the human stories.
So Mr. Treisler hatched an idea 8 years ago to help his students better understand the past.
It's completely different from any class that I've ever taken.
Jim set out to collect letters and artifacts from World War II at antique shops and online auctions and use them as teaching tools.
So with working with the letters, we get to hear their voice and know what they felt. So it makes it a lot more personal.
Today, the It Took a War project includes more than 5,000 letters and hundreds of artifacts from the Allies and their enemies, including a Nazi armband and medals and a note from a Japanese soldier missing his mother.
It's heart-wrenching. I couldn't imagine being in the same kind of position that they were in.
It's a treasure trove that would make most museum curators envious.
And it's just so emotional to read them and think that someone my age was going through such deep and raw emotion like that.
Some letters are pages long, others a few short lines, like the note from the mother of Jack Shelley, a U.S. Marine killed in the Pacific.
He always thought so much of you, so I just wanted you to know. I can't write much. My heart aches so much. Jack's mother, Mrs. C.W. Derrig.
These letters aren't sitting behind glass or packed away in a safe.
October 14th, 1944.
This is a hands-on lesson for Mr. Treisler's students.
I've had people that said, you know, these letters really belong in a museum, and you know, having students handle these letters is just not a great idea. You know, they'll destroy the letters. And you know, students have been so reverent with the letters. They take great care.
While most letters come with a price tag, others in the collection are donated.
I never knew my grandfather.
Like the dozens of notes from senior Zach Kaufman's family.
I shall but love thee better after death.
Zach's late grandfather John saved each and every letter his future wife Winifred sent to him on the battlefield in Europe.
This expresses much more than I could ever say just how much I love you. I think it's a really good way that we can honor the veterans, especially my grandfather, how we can make him immortalized. All of that becomes permanent with this project.
It Took a War is showing no signs of slowing down. The students are transcribing and digitizing each and every letter, which they'll share with the world on the class website.
When you take 8 years now that we've worked on it, and up to 100 students per year working on it, you know, together we can do unbelievable things.
May 7th, 1945.
Reading the intimate thoughts of soldiers and their worried loved ones at home. So much more than just a chapter in a history book.
My dear folks, today the war here finished. I can't seem to grasp it.
Letters from the greatest generation, shaping a new generation of historians.
Honey dear, we have been waiting for over 3 years for all this, and now it is really over. Love and more love to my sweet, adorable little angel.